Hi everyone, this is Kona, and I'm going to go through how to do the two-proportion hypothesis test using Minitab. So to start out with, our claim is that there's no difference between the proportion of randomly sampled men and women who said they would date someone with a great personality, even if they did not find them attractive. And that should be a period, not a question. So there is no difference between the proportion of randomly sampled men and women who said they would date someone with a great personality, even if they didn't find them attractive. So there's your claim. So step one is we need to check our assumptions. Independent, so even though, well, it does say randomly sampled. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and say yes because of the randomly sampled. But remember what I said before with the one sample, even if it didn't say randomly sampled, normally we just go ahead and assume independence unless it's a clear-cut case that it's definitely not independent. Then for our success and failures, this is going to be very similar to what we did with the one proportion, except this time we're using date personality. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and look in Minitab. So what do these different columns mean? The date pers one, this very first one, no and yes, this is whether or not the person would date someone who had a great personality, but the person didn't find them attractive. So this is no, I wouldn't. Yes, I would date someone like that. Gender is whether the person who responded was male or female. And then religion is whether or not they find religion not important, fairly important, not important at all. And we're actually not using this column for this test, so you can kind of ignore that one. So for this one, remember what we're trying to do is look at success and failures, and this one time is for the date personality, because that's the variable we're actually looking at. So we're going to go to Stat, Tables, Tally Individual Variables, and we're going to do the date personality. We want the percents and the cumulative counts, and click OK. So now we're going to take each one of these percents, this one and this one, and turn it into a decimal and multiply it by the 1004 to make sure that there are more than 10, at least, or at least more than 10, that there's 10 or more. So over here, we've got 1004 times 0.4871 is equal to 489. 1004 times 0.5129 is 514. Both are much bigger than 10. So we're good for our assumptions. Step two is write the original claim. There is no difference between the proportion of men and women who said blah, blah, blah. All right, is it the null or alternative? Well, the no difference part is what lets you know that this is the null. So no difference, this is the null. Then remember, if it's the null, then we're always have that reject. If it was alternative, it would be support. But since it's the null, it's always going to be reject. But when we come over to which tail, we determine the tail based on the alternative claim. So if the null is that there's no difference, then the alternative would be that there is a difference. So that would be the not equal to, and so that would be both. So null is the reject, and the tail is both, the not equal to, and that's because of the alternative claim. So moving right along, the next thing we're going to need to do is actually calculate the appropriate statistic using Minitab. So we're going to come over here, back to Minitab. We're going to do stat, basic stats, two proportions. So for our samples, that's our date personality, because that's our actual data that we're actually counting, is whether or not they would date someone who had a good personality but they weren't attracted to. And then the sample IDs are gender. Both samples are in one column, so you can leave that one. Then under options, the 95 is fine. The hypothesized difference is fine. For this one, we want the alternative, and remember we said over here that our alternative hypothesis was that not equals, that both or not equals. So we're good there. Now for the test method, instead of estimate the proportions separately, we're going to actually pool the estimate of the proportions. Click OK, and click OK again. So here we're going to end up with the estimate of difference right there. We get our confidence interval, which is right there, your z-score, and your p-value. You also have the number of females who said yes they would, and the number of males who said yes they would. And that's just from eyeballing it. You've got 64% of females versus 34% approximately of males. So that p-value is pretty darn low. So if we come back over here, and I've got the data right there. So the number of females is 167, which is that 64%, 148, which is 34%. So these are the number who actually said yes, they would date someone who had a good personality, even if they didn't find them attractive. Here's your confidence interval for the difference, your z-score, and then your p-value. So you notice your p-value is 0, 0, 0. Well, that doesn't mean your p-value is actually 0. What that means is p is actually less than 0.0005. So when you write your p-value, you would actually just say p is less than 0.005. That's how you would actually write it out. So is there enough evidence? Well, our p is 0, or less than 0.0005, and that is by far less than or equal to 0.05. If it's a less than 0.005, then it's is. So there is enough evidence because we have a very small p-value. So there definitely is something going on. That p-value is an indication that something is happening, which doesn't surprise me given that the females were 367 and the males were 148. That's a pretty big difference between the two of them. So in making your decision about your original claim, there is, because our p-value, enough evidence to reject, because you remember the reject comes from right up here. We are using our null, which is our reject. So there is enough evidence to reject the claim that there is no difference between the proportion of randomly sampled men and women who said they would date someone. So the no difference, which means that they would be equal. So basically, we're rejecting that there's no difference, and instead we're saying there is a difference between the proportion of randomly sampled men and women who said they would date someone. So there is a difference here, and yeah, which isn't surprising given the 367 to the 148. And there you go. We've now done the two proportion hypothesis test using Minitab. That's all you need.